What's up, friends? Welcome to Leaders, Letters, and Legacy alongside Dr. Marianne Callais. I'm your co-host, Scott Fussell, and we are thrilled you decided to tap play and spend some time with us today. We'd love it if you'd consider the show a verbal archives for many of the stories and the people who've shaped the fraternity sorority movement for the past 2+ centuries. It's time we shine a light on leaders. It's time we help them write a love letter about their letters. It is time we talk about the legacy we want to leave behind. It's time for another episode of Leaders, Letters, and Legacy. Let's go. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to a special edition of Leaders, Letters, and Legacy. We are thrilled that you decided to spend some time with us today. We are specifically focusing on ritual this week, and we're doing that as our way of honoring National Ritual Celebration Week. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with it, it was started back in 2011 by Phi Mu and has blossomed throughout the entire fraternity sorority community. And we're excited to partner with Phi Mu this year to bring a special edition of the podcast and have a one-on-one about ritual and what it has meant to each of us. And we're going to start by talking about where does ritual come from, because it hasn't always been a part of our organizations, which might be a surprise to some. So, Mac, it's great to see you. Would love for you to spend a little time talking about your dissertation, specifically why we started doing ritual, why we created them, and what the history of it has looked like since we began.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. This has been my dream, was for just all of us to have some sort of appreciation for ritual. But I'll have to be honest, as an undergraduate, I really was kind of clueless. I knew we had these ceremonies, but I was like, okay. And I think people would be surprised that we're not being very serious when we're talking about ritual, because I think we have made ritual, these beautiful ceremonies, be something that we only do it in a moment of time because we have to, instead of like bringing it out and just having a conversation about it and saying, how are we doing? Like, we've got this roadmap, that's been passed down from generation to generation, but what are we doing with that? Like, how are we living those values? So my dissertation research was really about NPC sororities and ritual and behavior of current undergraduate members. And basically, as I visited with students, they said, ritual is really not that important because it's not being taught and we don't understand it. So part of my review of literature, as part of a dissertation, one of the things that it said was that rituals in the sorority world are rites of passage through formalized ceremonies that were developed at a time when ceremonial transitions were a way of life. Ritual was intentionally developed to be a part of sororities and fraternities. At different stages in their growth process, at that time, young women knew that there would be various expectations of them. Whether it was turning 18 years old, getting married, receiving a religious rite of passage, or having to take responsibility for one's family, one knew that growing up was part of the transition, whether ceremonial or not.
And we'll be right back. This special episode of Leaders, Letters, and Legacy in honor of National Ritual Celebration Week is made possible thanks to the generous support of Phi Mu Fraternity. With a legacy of love, honor, and truth, Phi Mu continues to inspire members to live their values every single day. You see, ritual isn't just about words, it's about action, shaping the way we lead, the way we serve, and the way we build lifelong connections. So thank you, Phi Mu, for your commitment to this experience, to our community, and for helping us celebrate the power of ritual. Now back to the show.
I think that's the beautiful part about ritual, is that we're transitioned from one phase to another. So in most people's lives, they've walked across a stage for graduation, for example. You get to the end of the stage, you get your diploma. It's the completion of a really big goal, right? And then you walk to the edge and you turn that tassel, and it's actually a physical symbolism that you've moved from one status to another. And so in fraternities and sororities, I think at the time, especially in the 1800s, early 1900s, ceremonies were a big part of their lives because many probably most folks, had some sort of church connection, right?
Yeah.
Whatever that looked like, whatever their place of worship was. And so it was pretty natural that rituals would be a way to make a promise and then to keep some things secret. But people think it's secret because we don't want other people to know. At that point, it was secret because some universities said we couldn't exist.
Yeah.
And so that's where the secret comes from. And it was something that we would share specifically with those members of our organizations. And so, when I think about ritual today, I just did 2 workshops at regional conferences with students, current fraternity and sorority members, and they really are just kind of lost about why do we have these things called ritual and how do we make them applicable. And so I think it's a great time to have a conversation. The pandemic, many of us had to perform rituals on a Zoom call. And if anybody, I mean, when they first told me we were going to do initiation on a Zoom call, I was like, got to be kidding me, because I love the emotion and the feelings and all the things. And I just feel like, coming out of the pandemic, I'm so grateful for those members who did that. But I think we should have gone back and initiated everybody in person who was initiated on a screen.
Oh, I
I
think that's a
think,
great idea.
I think we should have, had some more intentionality around. There's been some loss of understanding of institutional knowledge. And I don't know that we did that. It's never too late. That's the beautiful part about ritual. It's never too late to pull it out, dust it off, and bring it into life again.
Yeah.
So,
Totally agree. Totally agree.
what do you think about ritual, Scott? I mean, I know that it's near and dear to your heart, and I know that Beta has always been an organization that has focused on the ritual. Actually was involved with one of your undergraduate institutes, and there's a building behind your headquarters, and those men went into that beautiful space. I have no idea what that space looks like. It's kind of like the Mormon church, right? If you're not a Mormon and you can't go into temple. So
Right.
you have a space as a part of that experience, you all come together. So I know ritual has been a part of the reason you fell in love with Beta, but ritual has continued to show up for you. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's been kind of amazing. When I first walked in the front door of 304 East Lido, I physically felt different. And then went through my pledging semester, my new member education process, and there was something about the actual initiation ceremony that really kind of changed my life. Not kind of changed my life, definitely changed my life. It was just one of the most impactful, most powerful experiences I've ever had. They were very specific moments that will forever be etched in my mind, whether it was the eye contact I made with a specific brother who was performing part of the ceremony, or, the part where we actually learn our secrets and, what our values and our principles and obligations are as members. I'll never forget those moments. I'll never forget receiving my badge or learning the grip or learning what my roll number was, signing the official roll book of the fraternity. I'll never forget those moments. And over the years, I've been really fortunate to have opportunities to work with some really, really dear friends to create those moments for others. One of my first big jobs as a consultant when I started working for Beta back in the summer of '95, my first big convention responsibility was to plan our model initiation for the convention.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was
That's a
extraordinary.
big responsibility.
It was. And because I was so fortunate to come from a chapter that took such incredible pride in it, I wanted that job. And our first call was back home. So I got my guys together and I was like, look, I need y'all to come to Cincinnati and just crush this, because this is the opportunity that we've been wanting for a lot of years. And it's an opportunity for us to teach others how this is supposed to be done. So for a little over a decade, I led that experience at our convention, and I've been able to play different roles in our initiation. And, I've just had this extraordinary opportunity to lead fathers and sons and students and a dear friend through our initiation ceremony, whether that's people who are being initiated as collegiate members to honorary initiates, initiated as alumni. So, I was just blessed with all those opportunities to try to recreate that experience that I had for so many others. I was really lucky to grow up under the roof of Carl and Bonnie Fussell, right? And I think the values that I learned through fraternity just and through ritual specifically just helped to reinforce the values that they tried to instill in me growing up. And when I think about ritual watch, I think are there specific words that come to mind? And I think about impact, I think about reinforcement and reminder, and I think about our ritual serves as a guide to how I live and how I lead and how I learn and how I lean on others. So all of those words and phrases come to mind, and those are the values I've learned through Beta really come alongside the values that mom and dad tried to teach me growing up. So having that reminder, but having it packaged a little bit differently has been life changing for me.
And I think it's a beautiful way for young people, especially, to be able to express something together in a meaningful space that's just sacred, right? It's unique. And I asked the students I was with the past couple of weeks, I asked them, I said, what do our members think about ritual right now? And they were really honest. They said they don't like it. It's boring. They don't understand it. And I said, so then why are we doing it? And in the same breath that they just told me they don't like it, it's weird, it's all the things, they're like, well, but of course we have to do it. And I said, why? So they know there's a purpose, but they don't always understand. And what I tell them is, even if the rituals have been updated, maybe they've had to be reassessed, like today, candles.
Right.
Surprise, surprise, we use candles, but some buildings now only allow you to use battery operated. And so real candles have a different impact. And some of our rituals may even be wrapped around some of that. What we haven't done a good job with is to say to them, one part is the ceremony. And those ceremonies, or within those ceremonies, there's a transition that happens, right? And then outside of the ceremonies, those values, and that's what gives us grounding. I told them, I said, the campus activities board on your campus doesn't have a ritual. And I said, do you really not understand that I have to believe that the reason why we've existed for all of these years is that we do have this thing that we make a promise to, and it gives a little bit more of a level of commitment. That's one of the things that I'm struggling with when our members just walk away, especially during the undergraduate years. I'm like, how could you walk away? Because you didn't even get to the good stuff, because the ritual, right? The ritual may not change, but you change. So what a freshman sees, for example, and gets from that ceremony, maybe it had an impact like you, but think about a senior who's about to transition to a different phase in life. And then the ritual, something clicks, and that makes sense to them. When I was the national president, I had never been a part of our ritual ceremony from a performance perspective. And I had to install chapters, and it's probably still been one of my greatest honors. And one of the young members that I knew, chapter president, said to me, she said, are you going to memorize the whole ceremony? And I was like, well, our ritual doesn't say you have to memorize the whole ceremony, just really the exchange of new member to member badge, that sort of thing. There are key parts that should have to be memorized, and then some that it's more impactful. She said, well, I memorized the whole ceremony. And I was like, you did what? And I thought to myself, that's a lot, right? And so it was back in the day. It does matter. And so I recorded it on my Walkman. For those of you who don't know what a Walkman is, it has a cassette. And I recorded it, And I listened to it as I traveled, as I was doing. I initiated people in my head all over the place,
Yep.
airports, wherever I was. The first time I was able to lead that initiation from memory, it was a conversation that was
Yes.
so beautiful. And I understood what she was trying to tell me. And I mean, I still see her, and every time I see her, I think about the gift that she gave me by the challenge. The second part was having done that for so long and then moving into a different phase where I wasn't delivering the ritual, was watching my young sisters perform that ritual with
Mm.
love and passion and care and intentionality. And as I changed and different things happened in my life, the words, the symbols, the faces around the room, what it meant to me was different. It was different. I think so often we focus on that the ceremony has to be performed perfectly. I would prefer for the ceremony to be performed passionately and have a couple of hiccups and them really embrace it, as opposed to, well, you didn't do this part or you missed this part. I think we're a little too judgmental sometimes with the performance. And I think we haven't taught the meaning for the actual impact to be something that they want to commit to. Today, we don't practice the ritual. We need to. We need to pull out the symbols and have a conversation, and just talk about, how is that symbol? The other day, I used an example. I was drinking out of a cup of water, and I put my cup of water, my clicker, and just my card next. And I said, if this half cup of water was in your ritual, what would be some of the words or the symbolism around that? They all just kind of looked at it. I said, what about if the ritual, the wording was, if we could see the world half full instead of half empty, right? That symbol was, I said, because that's how our young members back in the day wrote the rituals. They had symbolism that either they learned in the classics or things that they had grown up with. And I mean, you look at the organizations and their symbols, and it's like Delta Gamma. Their mottos, do good. It's an anchor, I mean, so the symbolism was simple. And I think we've just complicated it a little bit. So for me, the beauty is when it clicks and I can see that, it's remarkable. I always tell students, when somebody comes in and you want to hold them accountable, whether it's a conduct meeting or a standards board or whatever it is, why do you tell them what policies they broke or the law? They already know that. Just put their promises in front of them and say, which one did you choose not to live by? And I think then the responsibility is put back on the individual. How
Yeah.
am I
Yeah.
doing? How am I doing
Yep.
this?
I think one of the reasons why our members are unable to answer that question, which one of these promises did you choose not to fulfill? One of the reasons why they either don't fulfill the promise to begin with or they didn't know to fulfill it is because our ceremonies aren't done with excellence. So I think both things can be true. I think yeah, you can have really extraordinary conversations about what it looks like to walk out the ritual, but I also believe that you can deliver with excellence as well. One of the things that we talk about, and I love that you sort of hit on this a minute ago, you'd rather see it performed passionately and have a hiccup or two than, be kind of flawless and lacking of heart. We put a lot of emphasis on trying to have the whole thing memorized, but we also talk about a great reading is way better than a than a lackluster memorization. But something you said a few minutes ago really struck me, and it took me back to the first time that I did the initiation from memory. And I remember the specific role that I have. I had my ritual book in one hand, I had a candle in the other, and I'm stuck because I realize I need to turn the page and I can't turn the page with the candle in my hand. So I'm like, all right, you've rehearsed and you've practiced, you know this. I think it's time to go without a net. And I remember looking at one of the other guys I'm serving with on the cast, so to speak, and I just look at him and I mouth the words, no net. And I just put my book down and I remember he looked at me like, you have lost it right here in the middle of this ceremony. You have lost your mind. But that enabled me to have conversations with the other participants in ways that I wouldn't have if I'd had the anchor of that book there. I'd have still been looking down just to check my spacing, but I had to trust my rehearsal. I had to trust the muscle memory and really just lead our initiates through the ceremony. And I specifically remember a couple of conventions ago. Gosh, how do I even explain this? One of the things that is possible when we perform our ceremonies beautifully is there is a connection that can happen not just with the initiates and what they are hearing, but within those of us who are participating
Absolutely.
in the ceremony.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
gosh, Mac, it was amazing. I hadn't met hardly anybody in the cast. And there are, I don't know how many roles there are in our initiation ceremony. There's more than 10. And I had not met everybody. And there was one specific person I'd just met right before the ceremony. And he feels about the ritual like I feel about the ritual. And he had his stuff down. And I remember there's an interaction that he and I have to have during the ceremony. And I remember it felt like I just pressed play and that we were having a conversation. It wasn't like I was reciting words and he was reciting things back to me. It really felt like he and I were having a conversation.
Yep.
And when that ceremony was over, you better believe that he and I have connected and we have become extraordinary friends since then. And this is a guy that I met literally right before the ceremony began. And so if we can have those moments, and I think they're one of the amazing things about, and I don't want to get too hung up on the memorization piece, but I think it bears mentioning that if you are working to memorize your rituals, that requires a level of study that is intense.
Well, and
And
I think for our generation, Scott, what you're talking about right now is so important to us.
yes, yes. Well, and I think it can be important to this generation also. I had an opportunity to do a session on ritual at our winter conclave in Chicago a few weeks ago, and in preparation for it, I got with three or four guys that I was having share during the middle of the session, and I was like, "Gosh, I would love for you guys to pull out a section or two that you are really impacted by in the ceremony, and share that passage and why that is really striking to you, why it hits you at your core." And they shared things that I'd never even considered before. And what was amazing is that when you are working to either share our rituals, recite them, or you're doing a session on them, man, when you can dig into those pages and you sift through it, that inevitably, every time I pick up that book, something new jumps off the page at me
That's it. That's right.
every single time. And again, I coordinated that ceremony for our conventions over a dozen times, and now I've got a different role in it where I'm just a participant, not the coordinator. And here I am. I'm 52 years old. I was initiated on January 6th, 1991, and our ritual, our initiation ceremony, is still coming to life for me all those years later
That's right.
because people are inviting us into those spaces. They are sharing who we are, what we're about, and what we do from a place of love and intentionality. And that's impossible for that not to be inspiring and connective. Something you mentioned a little bit earlier that I really got me thinking about a book I read years and years and years ago called Leading with Soul. And it talks about the difference between a ceremony and a ritual. And I think oftentimes we look at our rituals as ceremonies, and they are. But if you wanted to break down those two actual words, a ceremony is a celebration. Think about a wedding or an award ceremony, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A ritual is something you do. So if we wanted to separate it out like that, our ritual should be how we're living. It should be how we're leading. It should be how we're loving and extending friendship. So that makes me kind of go back to what you were sharing earlier. Like, gosh, I would rather see people living it incredibly well than maybe performing it at an Oscar-worthy level. I think they can both coexist, but man, how much better life would be, how much better our chapters would be, how much better our culture would be if we were doing the ritual and not just performing it.
And I think, Scott, that's one of the things, it's no secret to those of us who are involved with fraternities and sororities, either on campuses or as volunteers or whatever the scenario is, that we've got issues and we've got some really big issues, right?
Yep.
And some of that is the formation timeline that most people join fraternities and sororities, especially the NIC, North American Interfraternity Conference, and the National Panhellenic Conference. And so the National Panhellenic Conference. And so I think that, one of the things when I was doing my research, there's this guy named Driver, and he wrote this beautiful book about trying to understand ritual. Like, why do we even have it in the world? And this is what I love. He says, ritual is moral territory, sometimes secular, sometimes religious, that has been staked out. Ritual marks the boundary at which wilderness, moral desert, or profane life stop. Whether referred to as rituals, rites of passage, or pathways, research indicates a need for ceremonies or life-changing events that transition people from one phase in their lives to another. He also says we need rituals to give stability to our behaviors and serves as vehicles of communication.
Read that last sentence one more time, please.
Yep. He says we need rituals to give stability to our behaviors and to serve as vehicles of communication. I think when we talk about it, and then he breaks it down, he says, not only are rituals behaviors. See, that's where I think a lot of people have missed the point where it's a ceremony. It's a behavior. And it says, since they are patterned and repetitive, they can be employed as signaling devices, an important enough point in itself. Equally, if not more significant, is that ritualizations can be used to store and transmit information across time and across generations. When I ask students why ritual, they always say it connects the generations. Even though they don't really know exactly what that means, it's the one thing they do understand, that other people did it before me and other people will do it after me, right? But I think ritual as a behavior is something we could really dig into and start to understand. When I talk to specifically NPC sorority women, I ask them, I said, how much time do y'all spend practicing the ritual before you perform initiation or participate? Do you have a conversation, or do people just show up? And they're like, most of the time they just show up. I said, and are they complaining about being there? Yeah, they're complaining about being there. And I said, so how do we flip that? I said, because how much time do you practice for primary recruitment, formal recruitment?
Jeez.
And they're
Oh,
like, oh my God. I mean, they go into the
yeah.
whole dramatic for a
Yep.
whole week or for other times. And I'm like, so, and you always say, even though sometimes it's painful, right? Because you spend all this time together, it's when you feel the closest to one another. And I really believe that the opportunity for rituals to impact behavior, if we just were more intentional about how we teach it. And I think, one of the things that I have learned from specifically the MPHC organizations, and we've had some of our favorites on our
Yeah.
podcast,
Yep.
but they're clear about that the word, I'm a Theta Phi Alpha. So the word theta, for example, is a word that is in Greek. It's a word. And then attached to that word is a symbol. And attached to that word is a value, right? And those all connect to how I'm supposed to live out that value. And I think we haven't taught the connectivity. So we wear letters, right? MPHC organizations never wear their letters on any other colors but their own.
Yeah.
We've become this marketing space where we're like, oh, just throw anything up on a t-shirt. If it's modern, it's all good,
Yeah.
right? But I think we've forgotten that we've got to bring focus back, because then when we start talking about values and we throw all these things out there, it's hard for an 18, 19, 20-year-old to hold on to that when they haven't had the lived experiences for it to have the same kind of impact, maybe. Some of them have. Some of them are looking. One of the things I'm fascinated about right now is when I say, where are first generation college students in the room? Those numbers are still high, not as high maybe as they used to be. When
Okay.
I ask first generation fraternity man or sorority woman, the hands are like half the room, at least their
Wow.
hands are up, because there's still something mysterious about being in an organization, one, that you were chosen, and two, that has a different level of responsibility.
Yeah.
But if the ritual's not tied to that, we could just be any other organization on a college campus. And so I think we've got to come back to focus. I think the other part is so many of our alumni and alumni, they say I was a member,
Yeah.
right? Instead of I am. Again, never hear the MPHC or culturally based organizations say that, but they haven't participated in the ritual in a long time. Maybe they don't have access to the actual reading of the book. How do we bring them back into the conversation? How do we bring them into a space like Sis talked about role modeling? How do we get them to come back and say, this value of love has lived out, that is a part of our ritual, has lived out in my life, and this is how. Let's have a conversation, right? I think if
Hmm.
we could do some of that, we wouldn't argue about policies and laws, and we would have a common understanding of, yeah, maybe I'm underage and the law says I can't drink, but more importantly, I made a promise to be a good member of my organization, so I'm going to make those decisions based upon that. That's a different conversation. Today's students, we just discount that they don't care. I don't think it's that they don't care. I think it's that they don't know. And
I
I think
agree.
if they knew more, and I think if we shared with them during the recruitment process that this is part of that experience and it's an expectation for you to learn and live, maybe as many people wouldn't find it as easy to walk away and just drop and dispose. I think it's all connected. And I think ritual is the missing link that we don't do so well right now. I'm so appreciative of Phi Mu putting this in the forefront to say we need to have a conversation. As I was sharing with Scott earlier in my dissertation, I looked at Phi Mu's history book where it talked about ritual, and it said the symbolism of Phi Mu is a heritage from our founders. And I love the word heritage as opposed to history. We haven't gotten history right, right? You understand where I'm coming from? But heritage is something that lands different for me, at least. It says, the symbolism of Phi Mu is a heritage from our founders and has been the source of inspiration to all succeeding initiates. It takes for granted allegiance to lofty ideals. Lofty ideals. That lands for me. It stimulates worthy and purposeful achievement. And in the personal equation, it challenges the best in all of us. Isn't that why we join fraternities and sororities? Because we want to belong to something that we hope helps us be a better person. And to me, that is just such a beautiful way to honor our past, to understand that we've had to learn from it, but to walk into our present and our future with those special gifts that have been passed down to us, however that looks. And to me, that's the beautiful part of the ritual of fraternities and sororities.
Rituals often, and should be, associated with the ceremony of initiation. And you touched on this a little bit earlier. The initiation ceremony is not the finish line.
No, it is the beginning.
To initiate something means you are starting it, you are beginning. So I think way too often we see my work here is done. No. It's just getting going. And that's one of the things that I have loved so much about the first few months of doing this podcast is there have been two traits, two characteristics that all of our guests have shared. First off, they all exemplify the values of the organization.
Absolutely.
And I think that is the case because they are all in pursuit. I have heard them either use the word pursuit specifically or one similar to it. They all understand, they have all understood that I am in pursuit of something. There is no finish line here. For me, I'm pursuing Beta's principles and obligations. I am trying to live. I fail often. But my job is to pursue living them with greater consistency and intentionality. I'm pursuing that in my life and actions, And it doesn't say during my college days, we're not talking about, my first few years as an alum. All of us, this is an assumption, but I think it's a safe one. We all made a promise.
That's right.
It took an oath to do it always.
Yep.
For our whole life.
Yep.
And so, my gosh, I think about how amazing the world would be, how amazing our members' lives would be, how amazing our organizations would be if we were all recommitted to our values and we saw them as something to pursue, not as a lesson we've already learned, but it's something we're continuing to chase.
I think in people's lives, right? Let's say, for example, if you decided to get married, you don't get married on your wedding day and you're like, this is the best day ever. Well, it's the best day ever at that moment. And then what comes after that are really a lot of great
That's
days.
the best day of your life. It's all downhill from here.
Right.
So that's
right.
Come on.
But the reason why you make promises in good times and bad, right? In sickness and in health is because You're going to journey through life with this other human, and it is not always going to be perfect. It's going to be difficult. And for some, that's when they throw in the hat and they're like, I'm done,
Too
right?
hard.
And that's
This is
okay. I
too
mean,
hard.
that's their decision, right? But the marriages that last a lifetime, like my parents and yours, it was because they worked through the good times and the bad. And so I think in fraternity and sorority, it's a journey. And you're right. I was fortunate enough, we didn't have some ceremonies that I had learned that some other organizations had. So I was able to write ceremonies with others, write music to
It's
those
amazing.
ceremonies that are now performed. And does anyone know that that's Marianne was a part of that and Angie and some other folks? No, but I hope that it brings them some moments of clarity and reflection, right? So that was a privilege and an honor, but I don't need to be recognized for it because it was just part of my calling at that time. I've also, we all have ceremonies throughout someone's life, and a lot of people don't even know that. They don't know that many of us have a ceremony that at your memorial service or funeral service, that if brothers and sisters are there, that you can bring someone into that next life as part of that final time on this earth. And I remember we had lost a student tragically, and her chapter and other alumni all went to her services. And in that ceremony, we participated with her family. And in part of that ceremony, it talks about that the links of our chain have been broken. And she now will be moved into the phase of the eternal chapter. I think that, when you think about that, we have to then reclasp her missing piece, but we're responsible for continuing on her love and role as one of our sisters. I think so often we forget that that's what this is about. I tell students when I'm teaching ritual, I would pull out there's a particular symbol in my sorority's ritual. I would pull that symbol out and I would just have us talk about it. Because if we understood what that one symbol represents in everyday language, everyday living, we might be able to come to some sort of an agreement. We don't use those symbols and those words and those transitions as tools anymore when
Mhm.
they're there. They're there. It's like when Sis said, Pi Phi's not going to leave you. Pi Phi's not going to leave you, you know? And I think those are the pieces of the puzzle that we've got to reignite a curiosity around ritual and a a willingness to teach and learn. And I think if we can do that, not everybody's going to want to be a part of that, and that's okay. But I think that's the moments that we need to get back to focus. We try to solve all of our challenges today with programs and policies, when in actuality, we have a really cool tool that we often forget is the most significant one. And it is what makes you a beta. It's
Yep.
what makes me a theta phi alpha. It's what makes the Phi Muse. It's what makes us who we are.
We already sort of have the owner's manual.
We have the roadmap.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we forget that we were never meant to be the same. We were all meant to be different. And I think that the more we can get clear on these beautiful organizations that I believe are more relevant today than maybe ever. But the
I
ritual can't be the last thing, it's got to be the first thing. And right now, the ritual in many situations is the last thing. We worry about how many people we have in our chapters. We worry about how much money we're raising. We worry about, the behavior of our members. All those things are important. But those, if the ritual was in the front part of the experience, those things would make sense. They wouldn't just be performative. And I think the more that we bring it into focus, because right now it's out of focus, that would be the difference. And it brings me back to Cheryl Turner. She says, I asked women, did you join the Deltas, the Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, or did you join Delta, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated? She goes, because if you only join for the members, she said, you can be disappointed, you can be let down, you're going to be frustrated. She said, but if you joined Delta, you will be clear.
Yeah.
And I think what she was saying in her experience is if you understand the why, then the rest comes into focus. And it's easier to commit to the work that you need to do than not. And I mean, you and I, we are at different phases in our engagement and our involvement with our own organizations, with other organizations. And part of why this podcast has become a passion for both of us, I believe, in our conversations, is that we don't want this to end for any of us. We want it to keep going on because the good stuff is still there, you know? And is it going to, do we have struggles? Yeah. Do we agree with everything? No. I mean, this is not like pie in the sky stuff. But without the ritual, I don't know if you and I would still be here doing this.
Oh no, we would not be, because that's the glue, right? And there's no, if there's no ritual, there's nothing to pursue. I can, if I want to be a part of a club, I can go join the Young Republicans or Democrats club on campus. I can go spend all my time at the rec. I can be a part of, pick a club on campus.
Yep.
But that's it. That journey's done at the end of your collegiate career, because they don't have a ritual. Like, we are making a promise that this is a lifelong journey for us. You've done a great job of hitting on some of the things that our guests have shared over the last couple of months. And two that come to mind while you were talking was when Dan Shaver shared, you have a pen. You have a pen. And I don't know that our members fully understand the amount of power and creativity they have at their disposal. Most of our rituals were not written when our founders founded our organizations. So they've all been evolving over years, over years, over
They're
years.
not static. I
They are
think
not.
so many people have thought they're static, and
Yes.
they're not, because we
No.
are not the same anymore.
Right. So if you don't like something, I'm not talking substantive. Like, we're not going to change the values of the organization because you don't care for them. But if you don't like the way something's worded or something's boring to you, then you have some agency. It can be changed. And none of this stuff is written in stone. So you have a pen. And I would
And I
hope our
love
listeners will remember that. And that got me thinking back to JJ talking about, just give me one. Just give me one. She's not trying to solve the world every day. She just wants to be able to speak into and build into one person a day. That's all she's praying for.
Yeah,
Now,
and I mean,
if
even our conversation with Sean Eagleberger the other day when Sean talked about ritual revisions, right? I mean, every time we perform our ritual, we have to be adaptable to a space. We have to be adaptable to, right? I mean, again, like I said, universities have regulations or buildings have regulations on things we can do now and things we at the end of the day, the bond that a ritual is intended to create is that it's like when you go to watch a play, right? The actors are performing the play, but the emotion, if they do it really well, jumps off that stage and you might cry or you might have a memory. It causes a connectedness to the actors. It's like the people who perform it versus the people who create and make up. One of the chapters I installed, I only had one other national officer able to come with me. We flew into a town in Texas, and the weather was really bad. We didn't get in until late. And those women waited up for us till 2 o'clock in the morning to greet us. Okay. Most of them are from Latina descent. So family is very important to them. Very. So the next day when we were performing the ceremony, we didn't have enough initiated members to play all the roles. So we initiated alumni, and then we would put them into a role. And then we'd initiate someone else and we'd put them into a role. Was it done by the book? No, because we would have never done it that way. But my gosh, watching the ritual become one actor was added on and another was added on and another. And then we had a conversation. And then that night, basically, we had their celebration and their families came and they celebrated that chapter to this day. The ritual is still so important to them 20 years later. It's been passed down in such a beautiful way. The love for what has given them one another. And to me, as we talk about ritual, that's the beautiful part. Ritual gives you your family of choice. We talk a lot about family of origin, family of choice. Ritual gives you your family of choice. And then how you live that out is kind of up to you. Are you going to be a family member who engages and cares and supports the family? Or are you going to be somebody who checks out when it gets to be tough times or it just doesn't fit anymore? To me, if you understood the promises, you understood the mission. And the mission was it wasn't for 4 years or 2 years or until it doesn't fit. The mission is that it's for a lifetime. And so my charge, especially for any alumni and alumni who are listening to this, my charge is pick up the phone, call somebody, get on a Zoom call, go have coffee, and just say, why are we still friends? And why are we still brothers or sisters? And what can I do to support you, our organization? What can we do? Because at the end of the day, if we don't start changing the way people see that this is a lifetime experience, I don't know where we're going to be in 15 years. The other part that I think is important to this whole ritual conversation is that our members are joining other organizations later in life. How many people do you know that are members of the Masonic Order? How many people do you know who are very involved in their church? How many people do you know that I know and you know, women who are joining Junior League, women who are joining other organizations? They're looking for something they've already gotten. We need them. We need them back. We need them. We need them.
Well, the other thing that's really important for us to mention and to really hit home, and we touched on this earlier, is this experience has never been more necessary than it is right now. We get asked a lot, is fraternity still relevant? Well, the short answer is yes, but I would take it one step further. I think we are necessary. 1 in 2 Americans struggles with isolation and loneliness. We've got members of our communities are starving for connection. So we need each other. People need this experience. And now we started to talk about, just give me one a little bit earlier. And then you talked about loved ones. And so this whole idea of one keeps coming back to me. And a couple parting thoughts as we start to wrap up here. When we're talking about walking out, the whole idea of just give me one, for those of you who have some say so or control or agency over what it looks like to execute our ceremonies, I really want to encourage you to keep in mind that we get one shot to initiate somebody for the first time. And if we've done the new member process well, their level of anticipation and excitement and curiosity should be at an all-time level. They deserve, every single one of them that we're welcoming into our organizations, deserve our absolute best. They deserve it. And if we can give that to them, then they're going to want to ask some questions when the ceremony's over. Hey, can I get that book out myself? Can we talk about this? I want to go back and have a conversation about that. If we can capitalize on that curiosity, that anticipation, that thirst for what they've been experiencing, my God, what a powerful moment that is for us. And that we can have that, and we can give that gift to them. We can give that gift to them. So when I talk about this being a life-changing experience, I mean that, and they deserve that. So as we're getting on the back end of our new member education processes, keep that in mind.
That's
What
great.
these young people deserve. They deserve your best. They deserve your best. They deserve a meaningful experience that is engaging and inspirational. So keep that in mind.
And Scott, the other piece I would like to add to that is that if the conversation continues, that's where the teaching and the living of the behavior
Yes.
manifest itself, right? That's why we have role models that we call big brothers and big sisters. It's not to teach them how much they can drink in one setting or to do whatever. It's about, I'm going to introduce you to my friends who are juniors and seniors and some alumni and some alumni. I want you to see this experience for yourself, right? And by the way, you might do some stupid stuff and we're going to hold each other accountable, right? That's where the ritual becomes the behavior. And so by doing it right, doing it well, what you just talked about, that's where it starts becoming, it manifests itself in the lives of our members. And we don't expect them to always get it right. We don't get it right, right?
No, but but if you don't try and
That's right.
we've got to develop, I call it moral muscle memory. Like if I don't understand our principles, then I'm not going to be able to walk them out. And
Lori called it moral
formation, yes.
That's right.
Yeah, yes. And so we've got to create enough curiosity for people to want to know more, for them to want to be more, and to coach people up when it's not happening. But they've got to want to take the at bat. They've got to want to try to be bigger and better.
But I think as alumni and alumni, I want you to hear, I hope our listeners are hearing, 19-year-old or 20-year-old does not have the life experiences to be able to do this by themselves. One of the things that is our responsibility to be privileged alumni and alumni of our organizations, members, right? Alumni, is that they need us to help teach this. And if we're not willing to do that, you can't really be upset with them for not knowing. And so my call to action, I sat with students this past weekend in California who are hungry for someone to help them to better understand what this is really supposed to be about. They care. They just don't always have all the answers. And I think we need to invest in them a little bit differently. You know, we can all think of that person who taught us and who has been that example for us. So I'm just so grateful, Scott, to Phi Mu for allowing us to be a part of this special experience. We hope that, you remember at the beginning of the week, if we could wear our pins, wear our badges, to show others that symbolism of pride in being a fraternity man or a sorority woman. And I think that the more we can put pride back into this experience at all ages and stages of our lives, we've got something really special, and we need to take care of it and be intentional.
So go dust that book off, sift through those pages, and have a conversation. I think one of the most effective ways we can have that conversation is to ask each other what it looks like when our ritual comes to life, and who are the people that embody that. So have those conversations. Have the best National Ritual Celebration Week ever. Again, thanks to our friends at Phi Mu. Thanks to you, Mac, for sharing your expertise and your thoughts here. And thanks to each of you for tap and play and spending some time with us today. We hope you're having a life-changing experience for a lifetime, and we can't wait to be with you the next time on Leaders, Letters, and Legacy. Take care, everyone. This special episode of Leaders, Letters, and Legacy in honor of National Ritual Celebration Week is made possible thanks to the generous support of Phi Mu Fraternity. With a legacy of love, honor, and truth, Phi Mu continues to inspire members to live their values every single day. You see, ritual isn't just about words, it's about action, shaping the way we lead, the way we serve, and the way we build lifelong connections. So thank you, Phi Mu, for your commitment to this experience, to our community, and for helping us celebrate the power of ritual. Today's show was hosted by Dr. Marianne Callais and Scott Fussell. For more information, please follow the show on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. You can also follow Dr. Mac and Scott on social or on the web at mariannecallais.com and scottfussellcoaching.com. Thanks again for tapping play and joining us for another episode of Leaders, Letters, and Legacy. This has been a Find Your People production.